The following program is part of a college course. These telecourses allow you to earn college credits at home. For more information, contact a college or university near you.
All animals eat in order to survive, but some must be more diligent about it than others. Hummingbirds spend most of their lives in a constant blur, searching for the nectar that fuels their spirited lifestyle.
Hummingbirds are among the smallest vertebrates, and because of that, they have one of the highest metabolic rates of any vertebrate. And they need to be able to consume a lot of energy very quickly to support this metabolic rate. They need to be able to consume large volumes of nectar very rapidly and get rid of the water so that they can keep the energy coming in.
The balance of our body's internal environment, homeostasis, depends in part on the interactions of the digestive and urinary systems. In other words, it's not just what we eat, it's also what we keep. At a remote research station, Dr. Carol Bouchard is setting a big trap for a very small beast. With feeders, she lures in wild hummingbirds who are always ready for a quick meal. As dusk approaches, all the feeders are removed except those inside the capture tent. The doctor then wraps each captured bird to prevent injury during their trip to the lab.
I'm comfortable here. Okay, this is a male anise, and he's an adult. We check them routinely to see if they've got adequate fat on them, make sure they don't have any mites. We check their feet for evidence of soreness because we need to catch that early if there's a problem. He's a little fussy. Well, he looks fine.
With her tiny flock, Dr. Bouchard will explore how all animals balance what they eat with what they keep.
Hummingbirds are actually ideal animals to work with because they do well in captivity, and we can determine exactly the composition of what they're eating. We can quantify how much they're eating. We can collect everything they excrete. So we can do a total balance sheet for any nutrient that's in their diet.
By carefully recording what the birds take in and what they release, Dr. Bouchard hopes to explain how these tiny creatures can absorb all the sugar they ingest each day.
The hummingbird consumes far more sucrose and glucose than its transporters can possibly take up. And yet we don't see glucose coming out the other end of the bird. And this is a puzzle to physiologists. Recent information suggests that, in fact, they don't rely entirely on those transporters to take up glucose. Instead, what they do is open passageways between cells, and they absorb water and the nutrients that are in it, in the gastrointestinal tract, through these gaps between cells. And that's extremely efficient because it doesn't require an ATP for every glucose that's moved across the membrane.
The hummingbird's insatiable appetite creates another challenge for both its gastrointestinal, or GI tract, and its urinary system.
For a hummingbird, for instance, that's ingesting 4 times, 5 times its body mass in water every day, there's clearly a problem in terms of maintaining a reasonably constant internal environment. And What might limit the amount of water that a hummingbird can consume is not just the ability of the GI tract to process it, but also the ability of the kidney to filter and excrete the excess.
Like all animals, hummingbirds maintain a proper level of internal fluids by balancing what comes in with what goes out.
Animals can gain water from several different routes. The most obvious one is by drinking. The second one is water that's contained in the food that they consume. The third one is called metabolic water because it's water that's produced during the metabolism of specific substrates. So for instance, metabolism of fat releases energy. It also produces water as a consequence, and that water can be used by those animals to help meet its water budget. Water can be lost in a variety of ways as well. The animal can excrete water in its urine. Water is contained in feces. They can also lose water that's evaporated from the surface of the skin. Whether the animal's sweating or not, it's nonetheless losing water to the environment. The other major one is respiratory. So with each inhalation and expiration, the animal loses a considerable volume of water.
Taking in water helps most vertebrates release nitrogen-containing waste products through the urinary system.
There are three major forms in which vertebrates produce nitrogenous waste: ammonia, urea, and uric acid. Ammonia is very toxic, and so ammonia needs to be eliminated from the body efficiently and rapidly, and it requires large volumes of water. Urea is less toxic, but they can tolerate higher levels. It takes a little bit less water to excrete, and this is the primary nitrogenous waste form in mammals. The third major form, uric acid, is very insoluble, and so it tends to precipitate readily, and therefore requires very little water for elimination. This is the white stuff you see in the feces of birds and reptiles. Hummingbirds differ apparently from most other birds in that they produce uric acid under some conditions and ammonia under some other conditions. And the switch seems to be associated with changes in the rates of water flux through the animal.
By changing their waste products, hummingbirds can increase or decrease water loss depending on their needs. With this unique ability, these tiny birds maintain the delicate balance that supports their busy lives.
The hummingbirds are intrinsically interesting. They're fascinating birds. They live at the extreme. They do everything in an extreme way. But there are also some potential larger implications for the kind of research that we're doing. They're ideal models to study how kidneys deal with large volumes of fluid. The other respect in which they're extraordinary is they have extremely high blood glucose levels, and they seem to deal with that physiologically just fine. And it may well be that hummingbirds are an animal model for the study of diabetes in humans.
All animals use specialized organ systems that work together to maintain homeostasis. While the urinary system processes what goes out, the digestive system processes what goes in. All animals use energy they get from food. But what they eat depends on the animal. A contrast we can see at the Park Bench Cafe.
We didn't really advertise that people could bring their dogs here. It happened really because my wife was working the front end, and people would come and she would bring out little tidbits because she'd see them feeding stuff off the table. The wheels started turning, and so she went home one day and created the canine cuisine so they could, sit there and feel comfortable, and the owners didn't have to worry about it.
nutrients that are essential, those that absolutely have to be in the diet, are a little bit different for the dog, the cat, and man. But still, all of the nutrients are needed, some 60 odd, and it's in the kinds, the requirements, the way the animal has evolved.
While diets may vary, all animals are on a constant search for food. Whether we hunt in the wild or on a supermarket shelf, we all must eat to supply our bodies with nutrients.
Animals eat so they can function. If you don't take in energy and you don't take in the nutrients, then you just can't do all the things that the body needs to do to keep the animal or the person alive.
Our bodies unlock the nutrients in food using a group of organs we collectively call the digestive system. Whether simple or complex, all digestive systems perform 4 basic functions: ingestion, digestion, absorption, and egestion.
Ingestion is taking food into the body. This is what we do when we chew and swallow something. Digestion is breaking the food into smaller pieces, smaller particles, and then from particles to fragments of large molecules. This starts in the mouth, really, but goes on mainly in the stomach and the small intestine. In order to chew food and swallow it effectively, we need not only teeth, but also the salivary glands to produce watery fluid that contains mucus, which lubricates the food as it's being swallowed, and some digestive enzymes as well.
From the mouth, our food travels down the esophagus, a muscular tube which empties into the stomach.
The stomach has 2 main purposes. It's a very powerful muscle which simply grinds food particles, just like your Waring blender or Cuisinart. But it also contains enzymes that degrade primarily the proteins in food, and it also contains acid to allow the enzymes to work properly.
The stomach passes food on to the small intestine, where the pancreas and liver secrete compounds that continue the breakdown process. Once the food is reduced to its essential nutrients, the intestine can absorb them into the body.
The small intestine is a tube about 20 feet long. The surface is first folded into obvious folds that you can see by eye. On top of those folds are smaller folds called villi. They have the real purpose of amplifying the surface area of the small intestine about 8 times.
By the time food reaches the villi, it's a soup of partially digested enzymes and nutrients. Whether it's a fat, protein, or carbohydrate, each type of nutrient is disassembled by its own specific enzyme. In the cell membrane, embedded enzymes complete the breakdown of nutrients, preparing them for absorption. A carrier protein helps glucose and sodium move together through the outer membrane. Once inside, nutrients diffuse across the cell. However, to move through the inner membrane, some nutrients require energy. From the villus, most nutrients enter the bloodstream for transport throughout the body, but fats use the lymph system instead. With all major nutrients absorbed, the digestive soup is ready for final packaging in the large intestine or colon.
The colon is the place where the indigestible part of our alimentation is stored until it's evacuated. The more important physiological function is to extract all the water that can possibly be extracted that has passed through the small intestine non-absorbed.
While most vertebrates have the same basic digestive structure, some have developed unique differences to match their diet.
The 4 stomachs in the ruminant, in the herbivore, are used to digest plant materials. There's first a fermentation vat where the materials literally are broken down by bacteria and enzymes that are in that part of the gut. And then they go through the next series of 3 stomachs to do additional processing and absorption into the animal system.
Even in animals with systems like our own, we see subtle variations, which may account for some very different nutritional preferences.
My dog's a pig, so he'll eat anything.
I always just cross my fingers and pray that once I pay for that expensive food, he's going to eat it.
I'd love to go out and just eat everything that would, appeal to me, but obviously I don't do that, and so I'm kind of thinking the same way with my pet.
We buy what she'll eat, period.
In the case of the dog and the cat, they're both classified as carnivores, but dog has been a companion of man for literally millions of years and has learned to pick up the scraps that we don't eat, or we offer them parts of the food that we are eating. The cat, on the other hand, has been a predator since the beginning of time, and although a companion of man, they still are a predator and a hunter. Cats are therefore obligate carnivores. In fact, cats have about 5 or 6 nutrients that, if not provided from animal sources, the cat will die.
In order to determine a pet's nutritional needs, scientists must study their health and behavior on specially controlled diets.
Waltham Center for Pet Nutrition has a group of scientists. They're working on things such as palatability and behavior, but they're doing also basic nutritional research. One of the key things that they do is look at the energy needs of an animal.
Metabolism often affects dietary requirements. For example, the enzymes an animal possesses determine the nutrients it can synthesize for itself, and in turn, what it must eat.
Dogs can be vegetarians. A cat cannot. A person can be a vegetarian and not have any animal source material as long as they're very careful in how they balance the amino acids, the fatty acids, and nutrients that come into the body.
In addition to the basic food groups, the proteins, the carbohydrates, and the fats, we need minor nutrients, the vitamins and minerals, which we can't produce ourselves, and no single source of food contains. So to get the full spectrum of nutrients we need a varied diet.
Through our digestive system, we absorb the nutrients we need to survive. Our cells then rearrange these nutrients into usable molecules and waste products that must be removed by the urinary system. Any breakdown in this complex process can lead to dangerous results. Billy Jo Wiles suffers from acute kidney or renal failure. Because her kidneys can no longer balance fluids and filter toxins from the blood, her life now depends on a machine and the process of dialysis.
I knew something was wrong with Billy Jo. Detected something was wrong with Billy Jo, not knowing what it was. She could not urinate to get rid of the toxic fluids. Toxic fluids is backing up in her system. After determining it was kidney failure, they went immediately into dialysis, the dialysis phase.
3 hours per visit, 3 visits per week, week after week. Only a kidney transplant could replace this exhaustive process, which is normally performed by 2 fist-sized organs.
The main organs of the urinary system are the kidneys, and the kidneys actually produce the urine. The urine feeds from the kidneys through tubes known as the ureters into the bladder where the urine is stored, and from the bladder out through the urethra out of the body. The functional unit of the kidney is the nephron, and there are 1 million nephrons in each kidney. It starts with the glomerulus, which is a tuft of capillaries. And the urine is actually forced out of these capillaries into Bowman's space. And Bowman's space is made up of epithelial cells that then form a long tube, which is the nephron.
Nephrons extract excess fluids and waste in the form of urine.
Urine is produced by 3 processes: filtration, reabsorption, and secretion.
Filtration is the first step in urine production. It's driven by the blood pressure and the capillary pore size. So red blood cells and big proteins stay in the capillaries, but salts, sugars, and water move freely into the Bowman space. The rate of filtration is very high. It's 125 milliliters per minute. So the kidneys are monitoring the entire plasma volume every half hour.
Like plasma, filtrate contains nutrients that are too precious to lose. Fortunately, blood from the glomerulus flows around the remainder of the nephron for further modification. Within the nephron's tubules, cells regulate fluid contents, separating the nutrients from the wastes. Through a process called reabsorption, needed nutrients, ions, and water move from the filtrate back to the blood, preventing their loss in the urine. Some molecules diffuse, others use active transport. At the same time, secretion moves additional waste molecules from the blood to the tubular fluid, often with the help of an energy boost. In the cell membrane, transporter proteins determine which molecules are reabsorbed and which molecules are ultimately secreted.
Wastes are eliminated from the body very quickly, not just by filtration, but also by active extraction from the blood by these specific transporters.
But Billy Joe's kidneys can no longer separate essential molecules from waste products.
She still had some urine output, but it's not the kind of output that they need to get rid of the toxics.
While doctors can treat Billy Joe's form of renal failure, they have yet to determine its cause.
Diabetes is the most common cause now of end-stage kidney disease. Next to that, it's high blood pressure or hypertension. Slow progressive renal failure can be quite asymptomatic until it reaches relatively advanced stages. One indication could be an elevation of blood pressure. Also, fluid retention.
By removing excess fluids and waste, dialysis can reduce these symptoms.
The process of dialysis needs to remove waste products from the blood and not remove the nutrients that need to stay in the blood.
During dialysis, the patient's blood flows through permeable tubes immersed in a solution that keeps nutrients stable while waste products diffuse out. While effective, this procedure only works when the patient is attached to the machine. So between visits, they must control what they eat.
Patients are required to restrict fluid as well as sodium and potassium, and they're also placed on diets low in phosphorus.
Any big problems?
They also need to receive adequate calories in their diet as well.
You got to watch what you drink because you can't get rid of it. Give up a lot of food, like all your good chocolate, your potatoes, your beans, all the good stuff.
We don't normally think about every bite we eat because the body can adjust for any shortages or excesses our diet creates.
The body adjusts its crucial water content with an intricate regulation system. When blood is too concentrated, a water-regulating hormone called ADH travels into the nephron. A portion of the tubule stretches across an area of increasing salt concentration. Salt normally attracts water by osmosis, but only if water can pass through cell membranes. ADH makes the tubule more permeable to water, permitting water to reabsorb, concentrating urine, and returning water to the blood. When water in the body is plentiful, such as when you take a drink, ADH decreases. The tubule is then less permeable to water, and the liquid flows out as urine. Water output is adjusted constantly according to changing body needs.
And the kidney is really the main effector of homeostasis. It's responsible for carrying out the output and adjusting the output to match the input.
The more the public knows about the kidneys and understands the mechanisms by which it can be injured, then we have a better chance of working towards the prevention of progressive kidney failure.
Feel okay standing?
In Billy Joe's case, doctors may soon offer an alternative to the many hours she spends in dialysis, a kidney transplant.
First of all, she's motivated. She wants to have a kidney transplantation. She really has no medical contraindications. She's otherwise in good health.
This has brought our family together, because when we went as a family group to see Billy Joe, when she was in ICU, there was tears. The greatest blessing of expectation that I could have, if she goes on the computer network today, she'd get a kidney tomorrow.
All organ systems work together to maintain a delicate internal balance in an ongoing cycle that sustains our lives.